Welcome back to Rolando Estacado. My name is Rolando, and for today's episode, we're going to be covering something very special. We are going to be looking at the legendary Randall Model 1 knife. This is a very storied design, as is the Randall Made Knives brand, because they go as far back as the 1920s and 1930s and became even more popular among the military once the United States entered World War II. So I'm going to show you what the Randall one looks like and what the important features are, and some of the purpose-driven components of the blade, which makes it, in my opinion, one of the absolute must-haves if you are an edge weapons collector, edge weapons practitioner, but most of all, a Bowie knife practitioner. So the standard Randall 1 model comes in a 7-inch blade. Historically, that's what's been used. What I prefer, and it's produced nowadays, is the Randall 1 8-inch model, and this is what we have here. So this is relatively traditional as far as the World War II models are concerned. What you have here is a leather handle. You have the lanyard loop, and I happen to like this quite a bit, because this helps to secure the knife to the hand. Now, mind you, nowadays the idea of knife fighting is very much relegated to the role of fantasy by a lot of martial artists, because they don't believe that knives necessarily play that big of a role anymore. However, I think that's a contestable point. In World War I and World War II, and even as far as the Vietnam War, knives played a very big role in terms of engaging the enemy. It's something to open up mail or open up meals, or even just do a little bit of kindling. This was considered a combat weapon when it was being used in World War II, and if I'm not mistaken, all the way up into the Vietnam War. So it's very purpose-driven. So there's a few things that I do want to point out. One of them is the lanyard loop. So it helps with securing the knife into your hand. That's one thing I do really like about it. The other thing that's purpose-driven, they kept the historical aspect of it, that this is an actual edge. This is a true edge. This can cut. So you can do back cuts with this Randall 1. So that's another feature of it. The other feature that I find very interesting, you won't necessarily find this in other Bowie knives that are out there, but there is a spacer right here where you can actually put your index finger to wrap around it. So from what I've read, the reason why this was designed so that you can wrap your finger around it is so that it gives you a more secure grip. This is World War II now, for sentry removal. Meaning, those were the days when, just like those John Wayne World War II movies, you just snuck up behind the person and you just ended them. You just went ahead and removed the sentry by doing this kind of movement. So you secure and you held. That was, I thought, was a pretty wild design, because if you look at today's modern Bowie knives, they don't necessarily have these, at least in my production Bowie knives. The Laredo doesn't have it, the Natchez doesn't have it. I think the 1911 has it, but I don't think that's what it was designed for. Regardless, this is a very interesting purpose-driven design of the Randall 1.8, and it shows a lot of thought that was put into it. And as a result of that, I did request this type of guard, where the guard, unlike the Hell's Bell, where the Hell's Bell famously has the devil's horn, where it comes up, because there was some thought around possible knife on knife, and the devil's horn would kind of catch the blade and protect the hand. For this one, since this is an 8-inch knife, and the idea is that very close quarters, and it was for sentry removal, the idea was that you could access it very easily, because you might be able to tell, but there's a very small downward angle right about here. Because if this was a devil's horn, that guard would actually get in the way. But here, it just slides in and off you go to do whatever fine work needs to be done as far as removing enemy sentries. So I'm going to be demonstrating how I like to move with it, how I like to flow with it, and utilizing some of these specific Randall 1 features. The bottom line of this is an absolute must-have if you are a Bowie collector, because this is historical. This has seen several theaters of war, and I absolutely adore my Randall 1. So without further ado, please enjoy the rest of this video. Thank you very much. The Randall 1 model knife is one of those modern iterations of the classic Bowie knife, and the fact that it is undersized relative to classical Bowies, which start at 9 inches and often go all the way up as high as the crazy 14-inch Bowie knives, it is amazing that there are these additional features that you can have. One of them is that you can actually have your finger notch around the base of that blade for added leverage. And what you'll see is that with that lanyard loop and that added finger groove, we're going to add some leverages to it that actually change the application paradigm. One of them is that you actually enter with both shoulders going in. And this gives you this added advantage of having your left hand act as a type of pressure tool to pressure forward, or to have it so that that left hand actually secures the target and can actually get the blade in a way that's hidden, in a way that's far more elusive. A little counterintuitive, because one thinks that with a Bowie, it's always right shoulder forward, but that's if the blade is longer. But if the blade is shorter, it allows you to have both shoulders come forward, almost like a tackle, and then when you come out, then you go back to your classical Bowie knife right shoulder lead paradigm. So you can do this going in, where the right shoulder goes forward, then both shoulders go in to finish, and then on the way out, you can flourish back out with the right shoulder forward. Now we're going to try this and use the real advantage of the Randall 1, where the index finger loops around that blade, because that loop around allows you to use it as a kind of pulling and pushing mechanism when you're really up close and personal with the blade. So when I'm using it in my practice, I use that left hand to secure the target, but then that secured index finger around the blade actually gives more pressure and blade force, so that I'm entering, and once I enter, I terminate upon entry. So the design of it allows for these different kinds of leverages and different grips. There is an additional one where upon entry, you can also use your thumb when you enter. So you'll see right here, that thumb can rest on the back end of the blade, which is not double-edged, it's flat. So you can use it for push cuts, but it is up close and personal in close range. So when I'm here, I actually cut right below and then right up with the thumb supporting the blade. So when you see these types of entries and flourishes, especially with the Randall 1, these grip switches with the index finger and with the thumb allows me to have good flow on the outside, but once I'm inside, I can use that thumb or index finger to switch very rapidly to apply more force to any of those cuts that you see. When I train with my Randall 1 Bowie knife, I combine both the FMA pedagogy and the Bowie combative pedagogy. One, because it's medium sized, but also number two, it's a more modern design so that you can put both of them together. So I can do right shoulder forward, just like with the Bowie combatives. But then when I do both shoulders coming in, then I can use more of that kind of World War II sentry removal idea. But anyway, hope you enjoyed this video. Stick around, stay tuned, more videos to come.